Olá a todas e também todos que estiverem aqui com a gente hoje. Meu nome é Heloise, eu sou diretora executiva da B-WEL, Black Women in Executive Leadership, e é um prazer e uma alegria recebê-las conosco, na Masterclass de hoje. Como vocês estão vendo, eu estou falando em português, é importante lembrar que nós temos praticado a tentativa de utilizar o máximo de idiomas possível para que essa de fato seja uma troca afrodiaspórica, em que a gente possa ter os saberes e os poderes também de tantas de nós na sua potência máxima. Então, estou aqui falando em português com vocês hoje, que é minha língua materna, e muito animada, muito feliz de recebê-las, vocês que já estão aqui sincronamente conosco. A gente também vai ter essa transmissão virtual em breve, então fiquem à vontade para trazer seus comentários, para engajar junto com a gente nesse momento. Sem mais delongas, porque eu não quero utilizar muito desse tempo precioso com as mulheres incríveis que estão conectadas com a gente hoje de diferentes lugares do mundo. Eu vou passar a palavra para a nossa querida moderadora, a Nox, que vai conduzir o momento de hoje para a gente fazer essa reflexão tão especial, continuando o que nós temos começado esse ano de refletir sobre diferentes aspectos de poder, né? Hoje a gente vai olhar mais para o poder interior, sobretudo o nosso poder de manter e resistir o descanso. Então, Nox, a palavra é sua, por favor, fica à vontade para nos conduzir por esse momento tão especial.
Thank you, Delo. I hope you said all nice things about me and us because my English translation is not working so well, but I will sort myself out. As Delo has introduced me, I am Knox. Don't worry about the long name and the weird surname. The full one will be Nokuthula Mchunu, but I'll probably not recognize if you use my full name. And of course, welcome to today's masterclass, of course, hosted by B-WEL. And of course, we have our lovely panelists as part of this discussion. And as Delo has indicated, our masterclass for today is something that is really, really important, the radical act of rest, self-care, as a resistance in the world built on our exhaustion. When I first saw this topic, it was quite, I had to really think about it because I'm not sure if I can speak on this, but I can moderate on it and learn on it. I will just introduce quickly our lovely panelists for today. Not in any order, of course. Our first panelist is Manuel. Also, they will talk about themselves, who holds a degree in business administration. And of course, we have Teresa Young. Of course, she's an activist and advocate, and of course, has been leading an organization for a long time. I'll let you tell you about this. And we've got Rhaea Russell-Cartwright. Of course, she's the director of the Racial Justice and Equity at Oxfam in Great Britain. And we will go straight to our conversation. And I think as a segue to my first question is that as Black women, we've always had this kind of perception of having an ending spring whirl of energy, power, without needing any type of self-care. And of course, thinking that we don't have any type of, I don't know, exhaustion. We just can continuously support all the different communities that we need to support in order to move forward. So I think for me, what I will do is that for our panelists on just on the topic before we segue into the questions, I will start possibly with Teresa on this. Sorry to surprise you, to just give your thoughts on the topic and what you think holistically and what is your first feeling when you see this type of discussion. Thank you.
Of course, Knox. First off, so great to see everybody and to be on this panel with these fantastic women with an organization, B-WEL, that I think is so fantastic. When I hear the conversation around self-care, I oftentimes am reminding ourselves that this is not about whether we get our hair done and our nails done. This is a conversation about an internal balance that we are seeking, an internal desire to care for oneself. And the one thing I would say is, as Black women, we are rarely given permission to care for ourselves, to actually say, our ancestors did not do it well. And so the model of how we take care of ourselves, what self-care looks like, is not something that we've seen in other places. So we're at a point where we are learning to experiment with what it means to practice self-care, to define it, to practice it, and to do it. And so I'm always looking for avenues on how to do it well. So I will be listening diligently to my fellow panelists. And I'm also, I definitely have seen, as I've spent 30 years in executive leadership roles, the need for the development of that, or else we will not be here for the next round of fights. So I would bump it over, Knox, to Manuela maybe to go from there. And I was just reminding myself, which you probably don't need it, but we have to remember to speak a little slower so that our colleagues who are interpreting have time to get out their questions or to respond.
Thank you, Teresa. Actually, I was thinking of going to Manuel, and thank you for reminding me to speak a little bit slower than normal. So, Manuel, I will hand over to you to segue into this. When you hear this topic of self-care, what do you think as a diaspora or Black woman? What does it mean to you?
Queria primeiro agradecer também essa roda de conversa aqui, agradecer a B-WEL, em nome da Delo. Estou muito animada de poder trocar com vocês. E essa pergunta, né, Nox, assim, para começar aqui a nossa conversa, né, o que me vem à cabeça, essa questão de autocuidado, eu fiquei muito pensando nas fases da vida, assim, né? Então, o que me vem à cabeça hoje certamente não é o que me vinha há 3 anos atrás, quando eu não tinha uma filha. Eu tenho uma filha de 3 anos, e como que a gente vai ressignificando ao longo da vida o que é autocuidado, assim. Eu fiquei pensando, né, a partir dessa conversa aqui, nossa, o que era cuidado para mim na minha juventude e como isso tem se transformado ao longo dos tempos, né? E aí eu concordo muito com a Teresa que tem sido uma construção chegar nesse modelo de pensar, de fato, quais são os meios para que a gente garanta esse autocuidado, uma vez que talvez eu queira quebrar a lógica ancestral que tem sido até então ancestral, e aí eu remontar um pouco a 2 ou 3 gerações da minha família, por exemplo, de garantir desse pensamento do que é autocuidado, assim. Eu acho que a geração que eu estou da minha família é essa que vem para tensionar, de fato, que não é apenas uma boa noite de sonho, né? Não é apenas fazer a unha, mas é isso também. Mas quais são as outras possibilidades de pensar isso, né? De pensar inclusive descanso. Tenho sido muito provocada com a ideia do que é descanso, assim, porque a lógica hoje de descanso que eu tenho observado, não só para mim, mas no meu círculo ampliado, ainda é um descanso produtivo, né? Assim, eu tenho esse tempo de descanso, então eu tenho que explorar ao máximo isso, né? Com muitas atividades que me proporcionem esse descanso, né? Tudo isso para dizer que eu estou muito ansiosa aqui, animada para ouvi-las um pouco sobre as estratégias, mas eu acho que a ideia de cuidado, para mim, está em transformação, assim, ela não está com muitos contornos, E eu acho que uma conversa como essa talvez seja uma das etapas que talvez a gente não fizesse há pouco tempo atrás, de falar sobre isso. Então, me parece que falar sobre isso talvez seja um dos primeiros passos para que a gente consiga criar esse referencial que a gente não tem do que é o cuidado, de como que a gente pode ter táticas para que isso aconteça, e aí, a partir disso, entrar na nossa própria subjetividade e chegar nesse modelo. Então, assim, né, chego trazendo nenhuma resposta, mais inquietações para a gente poder compartilhar aqui.
Thank you, Manuel, for that. I think I will come back on this tension so that we can discuss a little bit more. Let me just hold on, and I will come back to you. Think about does this tension mean when I come back with another question. I'll go to Rhaea. What do you, when you hear again this discussion on care and self-care, what does it bring to mind when we start this discussion today?
Thank you, Nox. And I'm glad to be in good company with my panelists of speaking quickly, because I have been called out one too many times for that as well. So hopefully we can all hold each other into check, and I can follow the good practice of my fellow panelists in modeling that too. I think the first thing that came to mind, and again, a huge, deep gratitude and honoured to Dello and the incredible B-WEL team for the invitation to be here in such an important space to this. The first thought that came to mind when I actually saw the title that Dello shared some time ago with me was, I'd really like to speak about that. I mean, quite often we get invited to spaces and, you know, with professional hats or personal hats, and we go, okay, but there was something in this that for me felt that all of the thinking in advance of this has been done through one of trying to embody that practice and really take note of just how difficult it is in practice to be able to construct that space of rest around our existence as Black women. And so I was speaking to a dear friend and sister of mine a couple of weeks ago and was saying about how excited I was to join this conversation today. And the first thing that she observed was, well, you know, you have to be in a bit of a space of rest in order to be able to contribute into the conversation. And so for me, what's been really interesting and useful to observe in real time is myself and how much I can continue to try and experiment. I think the point that Teresa brought up as well on how do you experiment in real time, just what that means, and all of those small moments where I could do this, but instead I'm protecting that. And so that's been, those were some of the immediate thoughts that came to mind. I'll hand back over to you, Nox, for the rest of them.
Yes, thank you, Rhaea. I will go back to Manuel, but before I go back to Manuel, Teresa, I want you to think about as Black women leaders, when we consider rest, of course, as a radical act of care, in the system that we know are opposite to promoting this, what truths do we need to confront, and when rest has been denied to us historically and systematically? So just think about this. What do Black women leaders, when we consider rest, what are these systematic challenges that we have to consider in the workspace? And I will go to Manuela and come back to this tension that you talk about. So how this tension or internalized guilt or external resistance to choose rest over work, even in the workspace or in our personal space. Can you talk a little bit more about this and how we can navigate this? It's you first, yes. Then I'll go to Teresa.
Faz 2 semanas, eu estava em férias com a minha família nuclear. E aí eu tive a oportunidade de ler um livro que chama Mesmo Rio, da Elisama Santos. É uma autora psicanalista brasileira, uma mulher negra, que escreveu essa ficção e que ela tem, desde então, quando eu leio um livro, e isso para mim tem a ver com descanso, ele fica por um período um certo hiperfoco na minha vida, assim. Então, para responder essa pergunta, eu queria trazer um pouco a história desse livro, porque esse livro o enredo, né, do livro é a história de uma família negra, uma mulher, um homem, uma mãe, um pai e 3 filhos. Um filho homem mais velho e 2 mulheres mais novas. E conta, essa mãe está morrendo, está no fim da vida, e aí conta a trajetória dessa família a partir do olhar de cada uma dessas pessoas na família. E tem uma personagem, que é a irmã do meio, a filha do meio, que é uma mulher negra, muito bem-sucedida, com filho, que está pensando questões no âmbito, enfim, matrimonial, que cuida muito da mãe desde criança, não dá trabalho, e que é uma excelente profissional. E aí tem uma passagem que ela está numa reunião, e ela uma reunião que é muito importante para ela, na concepção dela, e ela começa a tocar o celular dela, e ela vê 1000 ligações perdidas da família dela, que é justamente para falar de uma situação com a mãe dela, que está numa situação de vida e morte. E ela não atende o telefone, porque aquela reunião, para ela é muito importante. E ela fala, não dá para atender, porque eu preciso estar nessa reunião. E ela, assim que ela sai da reunião, a reunião é um sucesso, ela atende, vai atrás desse telefonema para ver, e vê que é uma situação muito de vida ou morte, e sai correndo para dar conta também desse cuidado da família. E aí essa personagem mostra a construção dela, como quando ou ela está em função da vida profissional dela, ou ela está em função da família em todos os âmbitos, e os poucos momentos que ela tem de cuidado para ela é quando ela nada, é quando ela pratica algum esporte. E ainda assim ela sente culpa quando ela pensa que ela quer largar a família ou quer largar o trabalho, enfim, ela trabalha essa culpa. Eu estou recorrendo a esse elemento da ficção porque eu acho que a ficção abre janelas para poder discutir situações da vida real, assim, muitas, né? E para mim o tensionamento está justamente nisso, como nós, enquanto mulheres negras, sentimos essa culpa do cuidado ou do autocuidado frente a uma situação de provação extrema profissional, cuidado familiar, cuidado em tantos âmbitos, e que o que resta para a gente nessa composição do tempo, que também tem contorno, né? Também é finito, né? De alguma forma. E nesse mesmo livro, vai mostrando esse tensionamento, e a construção da mãe é que ela entende o descanso, a construção desse livro vai mostrar o descanso dessa senhora, então, que já é uma senhora de quase 80 anos, só na morte. É um pouco trágico nesse sentido, né? E aí eu olho para isso, eu falo, eu não quero nenhum desses mundos, assim, nem um pouquinho restrito do dia a dia, hoje nos meus 40 anos, e nem achar o descanso na morte. É muito maluco pensar esse ideal, porque essa mãe de 80 anos, ela organiza o velório dela, ela deixa uma carta falando, olha, comprem salgadinhos aqui, não chamem todas essas pessoas, chamem apenas essas pessoas, me enterrem desse jeito, eu não quero ser cremada. E aí parece que o descanso ela só vai encontrar na morte, né? Então, para mim, esse livro mexeu muito comigo, de olhar para esses exemplos que a gente tem, e ao mesmo tempo me ver muito nessas personagens, e de construir uma forma de que essa culpa, né, e que esse descanso não chegue só no final da vida, seja em que momento for, e que essa culpa a gente consiga trabalhar com ela. A culpa, como você mesma falou, Nox, eu acho que ela vem, não tem como dissociar essa culpa da supremacia branca que a gente está inserido, né? No contexto da branquitude que a gente está inserido. Eu trabalho numa organização que olha justamente para isso, e essas coisas não estão dissociadas. Mas, ao mesmo tempo, a gente vai, de alguma forma, retroalimentando essa lógica e normaliza isso, né? Traz a ideia de supremacia branca de estar nesse mundo como normal. Uma conversa aqui como essa, para mim, faz a gente olhar e de fato, olhar a ficção, né? Esse livro, para mim, olhar e ver tantas situações da minha família, do meu dia a dia, das minhas amigas, e falar, mas gente, isso não é normal, né? Assim, a gente tá todo mundo de fato quase num limite de exaustão e a gente tratar isso como normalidade. Então, aparece no livro, né, coisas, frases que a gente ouve que nós, enquanto mulheres negras, temos que fazer 10 vezes mais que as pessoas brancas, por exemplo, e tem que dar conta, né? E a gente vai minha avó falava isso para minha mãe, que falava isso para mim, e eu falei, eu não vou falar isso para minha filha. Mas também eu quero que ela seja bem-sucedida profissionalmente, eu quero que ela também não quero que ela esmoeça de alguma forma, né? Então, essas inquietações é o que me atravessa atualmente. Queria ouvi-las, talvez, né, mais Teresa e Rhaea, assim, mas eu queria ouvi-las. Esse intencionamento que está dado, mas eu acho que ao observar esse intencionamento já é um passo. Tenho a sensação que as outras gerações nem olhavam um pouco para isso, né? Eu acho que a gente está num momento propício para olhar, encarar essa situação e aí sim construir formas de descanso, de cuidado, dentro de uma realidade possível, né? Também que não é necessariamente sair do centro urbano, ir para um outro extremo radical de vivência, né? Pode ser isso, mas não quero acreditar que é a única forma de chegar lá, né? Porque e aí fica um pouco impossível para a realidade da maior parte das pessoas. Então, é um pouco isso.
Thank you, Manuel. I'm going to go to Teresa about the leadership, but your point and about this fictionist book that you raised, Manuel, it reminds me of a poem that I have been looking around who is it attributed to for a long time, but it's quite famous and probably many of you have heard of it. It says the Black woman is dead. And it goes on list the reasons that she's dead is because she's taking care of everything except herself. So it's quite one of those emotional poems when I read, but it precisely speaks to this point. And it's a good then segue to go back to Teresa, because in your opening statement, Teresa, you stated that if we do not do or take self-care, we will not be there for the next fight. So as the Black women leaders who are in the forefront of this fight in the system, so what is it that we must consider as this hindrance or confront in order to be able to take our rest as required by us Black women? I'll hand over to you, to Teresa.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Manuela, for the reference to the book. I will desperately be reading it. I'll fill you all in on a like personal stuff. I, had been running, wasn't stopping to physically let myself rest and wasn't stopping to let my brain rest, right? So it was just a constant. And I checked my blood pressure one day, and all of it became so clear, right? Black women have the highest rates of high blood pressure, the highest rates of obesity in the United States, the highest rates of diabetes, the highest rates of heart disease. I thought, I am now going to be the statistic while I'm trying to save the world. And that was not not what I needed to be or needed to do. And so, looking at that blood pressure cuff and realizing that I could have a stroke because I had not stopped on any level to learn to take care of myself was really a moment. And I ran at that pace for a very long time. And, I just came out of having a sabbatical. 10 months ago, I took off 3 months, and it was part of the systems that I've been able to create here at the Ms. Foundation was to write a policy into play that says you must stop. As an organizational value, we say you and your health are important, and you have to actually learn to take the time. And it was during that time that like, I thought you had to be you had to meditate perfectly in order to meditate. And so, you know, because I am like many of my sisters in the movement space, we either do it perfectly or we don't do it at all. Like nobody's going to tell me, you know, that I wasn't a perfect meditator. I like could clear my brain, except I couldn't, right? And so, you know, it was this moment about like, how am I going to do the things? And it meant giving myself permission to not be perfect at determining what rest looks like. And that took a moment in time for me to figure that out, to give myself permission, which is one of the things that I had not seen my mother, my grandmother, my aunts, right? Even many of my friends do. And when I saw them taking time out for themselves to go for a run, to go to the gym, to cook because that's how they found joy, you know, I was like, how selfish are they? They're not. And then I had to stop and say, wait, what are the things that bring you joy? How are they wrapped into your rest practice? And how do you give yourself permission to not do it right? And we have to model that for each other. You know, I try desperately to meditate for 10 to 15 minutes a day. Guess when that happens? 5 minutes before I fall asleep at night. Like I'm not good at it, but it doesn't mean I'm not going to do it. And when we talk about rest, you know, I used to say, Manuela, you mentioned this, like, I'll rest when I'm dead. I've got to do this work today. And what I realized was the one thing we never get back is time. It is the only thing that is completely irreplaceable is time. And so I decided rest was important. 4 hours of sleep was not going to get me there. It also didn't help me be my smartest on the other side, right? And I just had to be really honest with myself and know myself. You know, I don't need 12 hours of sleep, but maybe 6 or 7 hours would be really nice, you know? And if that means I have to say no to something on one end so that my body actually has time to rest, so that I'm not holding every ounce of cortisone in my body, so that it doesn't just sit in my gut, and then all of a sudden I'm carrying the stress around with me. And so, you know, when I look at this question, we have to, as Black women, do things radically and do them well. But what if the radical was that we just tried? And one of the things I always say is, on my gravestone, I don't want it to say all the things I've done. What I want it to say is she tried. And so I want to give myself permission, and I ask people to give themselves permission to take care of self, not as a matter of perfection, but as an opportunity to try. And that's how when I look at the systems, we actually can recreate systems as leaders. Ask the question, why don't we have a sabbatical policy? At least in the United States, we barely take off 1 week, let alone 2 weeks. There's a critique. We work 80 hours so that we can take off 40 hours. You know, it doesn't make sense. So what if we started pushing back against the systems that really do not work for us and introduce systems that might, right? And if we at least ask the question, it will get us there slowly but surely.
Thank you, Teresa, for that. That is, yeah, quite thoughtful.
Yeah.
No, I'm just thinking it's like I'm a bad meditator, so I concur with you there. But I want to go to Rhaea on the statement, on your opening statement, also, Rhaea, when you said that your relative or your sister told you that you needed to rest to be able to do this. So for me, is maybe in your professional environment, what do you think is the relationship that we've kind of adopted about what we are talking about? Of course, I think Teresa has pointed that we call it radical act of care, because it should be normal, but because if somebody does it, it's like, oh, they can take time off. So what is the relationship in your environment, and how has this affected you?
Thank you, Nox. I think what that was bringing up for me was actually another conversation I had with another friend on I like to gather. I wanted to scope as much of this from fellow Black women as possible, because I knew that everyone would have something to input onto this point. And what became really, really interesting to me in the conversations that I was having is that I'd say probably like 80 to 90% of my friends and peers I'd spoken to on this subject had, when I'd said, okay, I'm going to try and do some body practice, I'm going to take that morning to myself back, I'm going to break that point in the middle of the day back. Because I mean, I should sort of caveat that with, it is quite a busy, it's Black History Month here in the UK. So it is also a peak moment for us and month for us. There's always a lot of exciting and really incredible things going on. And I think that's also a tension, is that the busy productivity can be quite an enticing place to operate in. There's some fulfillment, there's some joy. And so if, you know, it's almost that kind of the balance of how, if we want to stay in that energy in some spaces, how do we complement it back? To Teresa's point on doing it radically and trying to at least ensure that there's some balance in that. But as I was speaking to some friends and peers of mine, what was becoming really interesting is that, you know, because it's the radical act of rest is something that is so deeply personally intertwined in our beings, just as Manuela and Teresa have both spoken to. Certain people were saying, well, you just have to go and share exactly how it's been. But some of my peers, and all of these peers were all Black women, said you can never prepare too much. And without getting into the sort of tangent, which I'm very often doing, of you know, the pros and cons of what it means to prepare and such, it really sort of brought out a dynamic for me that I thought was quite interesting on how much Black women have to use preparation as a mode of survival to operate in institutions and structures that are waiting to see us fall. And so I think there's something about this that is intimately tied up in that as well. It's almost, you know, I think it's the point at where the preparation really sort of starts to become at the expense of performing for ourselves. And so that's what, I guess, the dynamic that I was speaking to. And I think it's one that's sort of consistent across the board. I think it operates in and out of, you know, different organizations, societies, and structures.
I think while we try to get Rhaea back, maybe let's share one question I saw on the chat for you. I think Teresa, somebody wanted to hear about some of the strategies or policies that you were talking about that you think organizations should kind of put in place. Maybe give hints what maybe are some of the elements that some people are looking for, or ideas on types of things, on these policies on self-care or radical act of care.
Yeah. So a couple of things. Sabbatical policies are one way of looking at termed time off. Also, requiring folks to use their time off could be used as a maximum for radical care. Reviewing policies is another avenue for care. And I think it's little things that we can do on a daily or weekly basis. One of the things that I do, I have high levels of Sunday anxiety. I don't sleep well on Sundays. I, you know, am very, you know, in preparation for the week ahead kind of thing. But now I have decided that I will not take meetings before 11 a.m. on Monday mornings for myself or for anybody. And it has changed, giving myself the permission to, and this is playing into what Rhaea was saying, giving myself permission to not have to be prepared on Sunday night, but clearing the schedule for Monday morning also says to everybody else in my space, we're not meeting at 9 a.m. on Monday morning, any of us. So none of us actually need to be ready Sunday at, 10 or 11 and get our brains running like, wild so that we can be prepared. So, that's a practice. That's an institutional practice that we have determined is that we will not take Monday morning meetings before 11 o'clock. And that practice gives people time to come into Monday not running, right? It doesn't mean I'm not up at, 5:30, 6 o'clock on Monday mornings. But what it means is I'm not spending all night Sunday or all day Sunday or just trying to squeeze in that one more. I manage my time around that. And, that is a practice that is not a policy, but it's a practice that we've, instituted. I turn off so that my nervous system doesn't just react to everything. I turn off my notifications. Let's use technology in the ways that can help benefit us. And then it's like really kind of crazy kinds of things. I create a pour over for the coffee, and I took the coffee pot out of the office so that everybody had to stop, wait for the water to boil. While they're waiting for the water to boil, they are in deep conversation with somebody else because you're waiting in the kitchen for the water to boil. And then you make your coffee. And, how are we slowing down both our minds and our bodies to respond? And there are, these seem very abstract, but if you do, if you don't, nobody starts till it's not nobody's in meetings until after 11 o'clock. It's not you're not starting. People are in the office. They're just not in meetings, It just changes where you're putting your time and your energy. And as leaders, we model what that looks like. And so, and sometimes, I say it's as little as we sometimes have a dance party. That too is, 5 minutes before a meeting that we're all going into, we have a speaker in the office, and I might push a little Whitney Houston or, so that we all just have a chance to, where we're all able to like break the moment and release. Movement helps release your bodies. That's an act, that's a radical act of doing something for yourself. So it doesn't have to be all the really hard stuff, which it could be. Only working a 35-hour work week, always taking an hour off for lunch. Like those are absolute practices that we should do, but I can't tell you the last time I had an hour off for lunch, But I will do a dance party, and I do make my coffee in the morning, and I do have those kinds of structures in place, and we do reinforce time off, and so those are some of the things that I would suggest. Just look at all the simple things. Part of radical rest and radical self-care is also knowing oneself. And so I think that's what I have learned to recognize, and then being gracious enough to let other people know themselves too and celebrate that for them.
Thank you, Teresa. I think I'm going to steal the idea of not having a meeting before 11 on a Monday. Thank you. I think Rhaea is back, and I will maybe let you complete your thought, but we'll come back to everyone on this. I really love some of the hints you've given us, Teresa. Rhaea will let you complete your thoughts if you are back properly.
Thank you, Nox. I'm not sure where I lost you at.
Oh,
Yeah.
but it wasn't very long before we noticed, so maybe a minute or two. So it wasn't long, yeah.
Yeah, I think I was speaking a bit to I was speaking a bit to the sort of ways in which preparation. So I was having a lot of conversations with a lot of friends and peers about this subject, because I feel there's so much that people see of themselves in it, and particularly Black women. And what became really apparent to me as I was having some of these conversations is that the same piece of advice or feedback loop that was coming was on this notion to you can't be prepared, you can't be more prepared. You can't prepare enough. And without going off into a big tangent about the importance of preparation or not preparation, I thought it was quite interesting that that was a sentiment that was coming predominantly from Black women friends of mine, because it really spoke to a dynamic of what it means to rest, in a system that is waiting to see you fall. And I think that that's also a tension point that comes in between what it means to rest often and be able to create the space. And one of the tensions around creating spaces on that is from, essentially operating within systems that are pushing you and waiting for you to do everything but that.
Thank you. I think
Am I still with you? Am I still with you?
You are
Oh,
still
excellent.
here.
Okay.
Yes. It
Good.
speaks to actually the point that Manuel raised on that Black women have to be 10 times better than the white folks. So I think, of course, this will create no time for people to rest if you have to prep and be always more ready than the other side. So I think I will go back now to Manuel, and this is all of you, for all of the panelists. Give us one non-negotiable for self-care or rest practice, and what did it take for you to get there? And while the panelists are busy sharing this, I would like the participants also to put in theirs on the chat box, so that we could see what are the hints for everybody, what they consider for themselves as self-care. And I will add mine, and this I will declare that I was given an idea by Teresa, because I thought I was not very good at self-care. So I will go to Manuel and then Teresa, and go back to you, Rhaea, for your one non-negotiable, and how did you get there? Manuel?
Eu vou responder, mas eu só queria somar no pensamento da Teresa, a partir da pergunta no chat, sobre as políticas institucionais para garantir essa questão do cuidado, muito rapidamente. Porque faz pouco tempo, deve fazer uns 2 meses, mais ou menos, eu tive num seminário que eu vi uma organização aqui do Brasil que chama Vote LGBTQIAP+, então uma organização que fomenta que representantes dessas comunidades sejam representantes políticos, né? E eles institucionalizaram uma política que é a seguinte: eles têm uma base de cuidados para todo mundo. Então, um pouco nesse molde que a Teresa traz, de boas práticas, de colocar sabático, isso é para todo mundo. Mas também eles desceram umas camadas e eles fazem diferenciação a partir da pessoalidade de algumas das pessoas. O que eu quero dizer com isso? Se você é uma mulher negra, você tem direito a determinadas políticas. Se você é uma mulher negra em situação de território vulnerável, você tem outras políticas. Se você é uma pessoa LGBTQIAP+, você tem direito a outras políticas. Então, dentro da mesma organização, que eles têm uma pluralidade de pessoas, tem um básico que todo mundo tem acesso, mas tem um tanto que eles vão diferenciando e, de fato, dentro de uma lógica de opressão, as mulheres negras, LGBTQIAP+, mães solos, se estão em territórios vulneráveis de violência, se são deficientes, elas têm ainda têm outras dinâmicas que são pensadas para esses públicos. E eu achei isso super interessante, porque, de fato, se a gente garante um sabático para um homem de classe média alta, branco, hétero, cis, no Brasil, é diferente do sabático de uma pessoa com deficiência, uma mulher negra, etc. Assim, eles vão experienciar esse sabático de formas diferentes. Então, pensar o cuidado dessas populações, e aí no nosso caso aqui, né, de mulheres negras, de uma forma, uma lente para isso, eu achei muito radical. Achei super interessante e fiquei pensando como implementar isso também. Eles colocaram isso como política, né? E não é sem dor, né? As pessoas, sobretudo todas as pessoas que trabalham nessa organização, partem de uma lógica progressista, né? Tem uma crença que está todo mundo no mesmo barco, logo deveriam ter as mesmas oportunidades. E a direção executiva banca e fala: não, você está na mesma luta, mas essa pessoa aqui, ela precisa de mais do que você aqui, né? Então, achei isso interessante, mexeu comigo para pensar numa outra lógica de implementar a política institucional, comprando umas brigas, uns desconfortos. Mas voltando à pergunta sobre o que é, eu gostei muito dessa pergunta, na verdade, assim, do que é inegociável para pensar proteção, cuidado, enfim. Porque, na verdade, eu entendi, o meu caminho foi entender que ser negociável algumas coisas me davam mais tranquilidade. E eu vou exemplificar isso. Em algum momento, as minhas férias era um ambiente muito precioso, assim, de nas minhas férias eu vou me desconectar de tudo que eu posso, eu vou desinstalar aplicativo de e-mail, eu vou sair dos grupos de WhatsApp, dos grupos de Slack, eu vou sair de tudo, vou me isolar completamente. Isso, para mim, é inegociável. Mas eu entendi que isso me causava uma tensão pré-férias e pós-férias muito grande, assim, de bancar que minhas férias eram preciosas e aqui eu não mexo, me dava uma tensão muito ruim que eu falei, será que eu não posso negociar isso aqui? Então, será que, eventualmente, as minhas férias é um ambiente muito, ainda assim, muito precioso para mim. Mas, eventualmente, se surgir uma reunião no meio das minhas férias, será que talvez fazer a reunião não vai trazer mais paz de espírito do que ficar pensando naquilo que está no meio das minhas férias, que é melhor eu antecipar, que é melhor, né? E aí eu entendi que, na verdade, eu estou no momento de negociar as coisas para tentar me trazer tranquilidade. Eu acho que é meio um paradoxo, é bastante um paradoxo, né? Assim, eu deveria ser algumas coisas em relação ao cuidado deveriam ser inegociáveis, mas para mim ser negociável é mais fácil para eu atingir essa questão do meu descanso, do meu cuidado e poder fazendo os balanços. Mas certamente, pegando esse exemplo das férias, e é justamente porque eu passei recentemente por essa experiência, talvez seja uma das questões inegociáveis para mim. Assim, então, direito institucional ao descanso, ele é muito importante para mim, na perspectiva das mulheres brasileiras em diáspora, eu acho que também. Aí eu queria só mencionar uma organização brasileira que chama Fundagbara, que elas fazem promoção, enfim, em vários âmbitos para as mulheres negras, mas elas abriram um edital recentemente que garante férias para mulheres negras. Então, elas abriram um edital para dar férias para as mulheres negras, a partir de uma pesquisa que muitas mulheres negras, no término de sua vida, nunca tiveram férias, assim, pensando no ciclo de vida aí até mais ou menos 70, 80 anos. E muitas histórias, elas identificaram muitas histórias de mulheres negras que nunca tiveram férias, que trabalharam desde muito cedo e ininterruptamente. E quando elas trouxeram isso numa conversa, né, e falaram, a gente vai fazer esse edital para dar férias, a gente se deu conta como isso era impactante, né? Então, férias para mim segue esse lugar inegociável, mas tem um pouquinho de negociável em termos de incluir eventualmente questões profissionais dentro dela. É isso.
Thank you, Manuel. It's quite a thing to think about. How do we get to the negotiate the non-negotiables to get there. I will go to Teresa on the same question. What is your one non-negotiable self-care act, and how did you arrive there?
Yeah, first off, Manuela, so spot on, right? The giving ourselves the permission to negotiate the non-negotiable is so important. I have a kind of weird, maybe non-negotiable. I do not work on airplanes. That sounds very insane, I know, but because we're all living on planes, and in many ways our footprint is what our footprint is. When I drive my car, I can make phone calls, right? I can be talking while I'm driving my car. When I am on a train, I turn on my computer and I'm working as I'm on the train. I have decided for years now that all the work that I need to do needs to be done before I get on the airplane. I refuse to open my computer on the airplane to do work. I refuse to read the article on the airplane. I will read a book on the airplane. I will watch a movie on the airplane, but I do not work. I do not open my computer on the airplane. And that is, travel is really hard on our bodies. It's hard on our systems. And it actually is a moment at which I have total permission. And I might get all in my head about thinking about things, but I have total permission to not work, not actually, and it's a 5-hour ride or a 10-hour. What? I'm not using that time, every ounce of my time now. And I will tell you, it's really like, I don't dread flying in the same vein because I feel like I'm getting a reward for the travel. So it's something that's out there and non-specific, but it's also, because I know when I'm driving my car, my assistant and I will book, every hour, right? When I'm on the train, I'm constantly sending the emails. When I am on an airplane, I feel like it's the permission to be 60,000 feet in the air and not have to connect. And so that's my one non-negotiable that I actually do not negotiate out. So, if that means I need to have the speech written or the prep done, I try to do that before, or I try to get there early enough that I can do it once I land. So I put that on the table. Don't work on airplanes.
Thank you, Teresa. I'm totally guilty of that. I actually make a folder for the plane. Yeah, I will go to you, Rhaea. It's the same question. What is your one non-negotiable, maybe negotiated, non-negotiable, and how did you what did it take for you to get there?
Mine is my mornings. So I won't negotiate on my mornings, but there were two things that were coming up for me in this question. And one is that it's really my chance to meet myself every day where I am. And it's also my space to be able to hold myself before I go out and engage with the world. And there was a bell hooks quote that for me really, really spoke to what the importance is of that for me. So she says, Black women have not focused sufficiently on our need for contemplative spaces. We are often too busy to find time for solitude. And yet it is in the stillness that we also learn how to be with ourselves in a spirit of acceptance and peace. Then when we re-enter community, we are able to extend this acceptance to others. Without knowing how to be alone, we cannot know how to be with others and sustain the necessary autonomy. And someone for me who is through and through an introvert, that spoke very, very, very strongly to me. And so what did it take for me to get to a point of making my morning sacred? I think waking up early is one. A level of discipline for the times, especially now we're entering a new season, the days are short, a level of discipline in terms of showing up for myself when I don't want to, or when I would rather have an additional hour in bed. But I think the most important thing around this non-negotiable for me is not really in so much what I'm doing. Do a whole matter of things. None of them will be of great surprise, and I'm sure that I would share them with many of us on this call. But it's really more just that space to ground myself and the intention with which I'm protecting in that moment. And so that really helps for me keep it as a non-negotiable, because it's my time for me before I then step into the world.
Thank you, Rhaea, for that. And I'm not sure if I missed anything in the chat. If please, even in the question and answer section, you can add your one non-negotiable for self-care. And of course, for me, I will share here is it's not sitting still. It is, of course, running. So that is my one non-negotiable. Even in the office, they know wherever I am, I should have an ability to run. If the weather, as Rhaea has rightly pointed out, is bad up here in Europe, so I always need a place to stay that has a gym, so I can get to do that. So it has become my one non-negotiable for some time. Yeah, I will keep looking at the chat, at the question and answer, to see who has added their non-negotiable and reading out to everyone. And while we are going through that, we'll go through the one of our last questions is how do you rest? How do rest and well-being has enhanced your leadership? And of course, your vision and all the abilities to make bold decisions. I will start, maybe since you are already on my screen, Rhaea, I will start with you and go backwards, Teresa, and then lastly, Manuel.
Thanks. I'm happy to pick up because I also love running Nox, so hopefully we can find a time to do that together. Running is high up on the list for me of peak enjoyment, but appreciate that. Yeah, it's equally some people's idea of hell. I am so yeah. How does it enhance leadership? I wanted to pick up on that because there was I think in what I was just reflecting on there about the discipline sometimes around rest. I think physical rest of being able to be horizontal is absolutely critical. But I also think coupled with that, and it was to a point that you were just speaking to, Nox, is the importance of it being actively doing something to shift your mindset that doesn't mean having to be in a state of stillness. So for me, I did martial arts for years, Taekwondo, and for years I was training with an incredible grandmaster who, was not there to try and make it into a fun, glitzy, glamorous, let's all do flying kicks. We were perfecting each of the attacking and defending several hours a week, every week on the go for over 10 years for me. And there was something about that, and I think Tricia Hersey also speaks to this, about rest being anything that connects your body to your mind. And so for me, actively engaging in practices that ground me in the presence, in the way that Taekwondo did for me for such a long time, was really important in disconnecting from the day, bringing my attention into the moment and recharging my energy in a bit of a different way. And so when I sort of reflect back on how has that helped drive forward my leadership, it has enabled me to operate from a space of clarity, focus, and renewed creativity around what I'm doing. And also just, I guess, a boldness really around being in a completely different space where you're existing. And it's really helped me lead differently in places. I think I feel the full effects, not just in my mind, but in my body, of when I'm not giving myself that space to be in a space. So so overall, it in every single way, this rest of being in a peaceful state and the rest of being in a proactively different state, I think sharpens my leadership.
Thank you, Rhaea, for pointing at us that sometimes care and rest sometimes means movement for some people, because it's a little bit. Sometimes we think, as Teresa said, it's just meditating. There's not only it. So for different people, there's different ways of self-care or rest. I will go to you, Teresa, for your input on this question.
Yeah. Well, I will say, both Rhea and Knox, you will not find me running. Somebody better be chasing me, and it better be a bear, because I am not the runner. There, I think only once in my life have I ever found the peace and joy of running, which I know runners really get. So respect. And I have seen Knox run, Rhea, I haven't seen you run, but like just the ability to be in that space is wonderful. But I'm somebody who believes in being outdoors, right? So there are two real places that there are three things that I would say are part of my rest and well-being. One, I try to find time to hike, not necessarily, hike a long trail, but, be outside in nature, hold myself accountable to the wonder of nature, without having to have the answers to that beautiful color that nature has put in mind. I also, another part of my well-being and my rest is the idea of always wanting to stay in wonder. So I do a couple of times a month, which I live in New York, so New York City, and so it's very lots of buildings, and it's but I try to stop and stargaze, because my institution and I are going through some transition, and one of the things I think we don't do long enough is stargaze, which requires us to stop, requires us to look up, and it requires us to reimagine the alignment of the constellations. And so, that is something that I really am intentional about. And so between those, I find myself between hiking and stargazing. I find myself in this well-noted balance. And the way this ties into my leadership and my vision is it allows me to sit with wonder. It allows me to connect. It allows me to, there is no downfall to being bold enough to realign the stars in your mind. And so then how do I test that to, the language I want to use, and so I've been very explicit about the language that I use in the work that I'm doing, because I think it's okay to do that. And then the last thing I would say that I do, which those who know me know this well, Knox and Delo and some of my dear B-WEL friends, I also find time for play. The idea of play is so constant for me, and it's what my degree is in, actually. Is the idea I play Rummy Cube. I play it everywhere. I travel with it. I'm slightly addicted. Stop laughing at me, Knox. And Rhea, when we meet, Manuela, when we meet, I will teach you if you don't know how to play, and we will play. And what it does is it gives me a chance to redirect energy, actually what Rhea was saying, redirect energy around alternative strategy that I otherwise don't get to use. And then I can relate it back to what I'm doing. But also, when you play like that, you are playing with the energy of others too. And that ability to be connected in community, right, helps generate safe places to be bold and to be experimental. And so I really love this concept around play and playing in those spaces. And so, I also see my well-being as tied to my connection to community, and being able to be able to be in relationship with other people is significant. And I'm not an extrovert, so it's not like I need to be in relationship with 100 people, but if I can be in relationship with one or two, that actually fills me and actually allows me to be bold, and then the last thing, very last thing, and then I will pass it over to Manuela, is the last thing I do is I always wear something or have something that centers me in the moment. So this necklace that I am wearing actually has a message on the back that just says, remember who the F you are, like knowing my own strength. I wear bracelets given to me by my friends so that I can remember that I am not in this work alone, right? So like whatever, I call them Easter eggs, what are these things that mean something to me, that if I find them, they are mine, right, in my heart and soul, but what does that do? And that actually is a way of me taking care of myself, which is on the rough days to look down and see the bracelet that one of my best friends gave me, allows me to stay centered, and allows me to remember that I am deeply loved and well and appreciated and have folks who've got my back, which then propels me into doing the more bold or intentional work that I think needs to get done.
Thank you, Teresa. We'll go to Manuel. Of course, again, and how do rest and well-being enhance your leadership, vision, and ability to make bold decisions, or just to make decisions? Sometimes that's all we need to do. Manuel?
Primeiro, eu quero dizer que tem duas corredoras, uma não corredora convicta, e eu comecei a correr recentemente. Então, no próximo encontro, a gente tem dá para ter uma ideia se eu viro de um time ou de outro. Tô ainda no meio termo aí. Tô gostando por enquanto. Não sei se vai perdurar, Teresa. Sempre achei que não era para mim, mas me dei a oportunidade. Eu adorei ouvi-las antes de poder falar, porque eu peguei muitas dicas e eu gostei especialmente de ouvir Teresa falando sobre brincar. E quando você falou sobre brincar, eu fiquei pensando também na ideia do correr e como essas coisas, se a gente for pensar em criança, isso tá tão evidente, tá tão nato nelas, e a gente vai perdendo essas coisas conforme a gente vai envelhecendo, né? Tanto correr, né? As crianças por si só, elas são ativas, a não ser que tenha alguma deficiência, mas elas correm, né? Elas sempre estão correndo, sempre estão se movimentando. E o brincar, e brincar por mediação, né? Às vezes com um jogo, assim, mas brincar, às vezes com uma folha que pega no meio da rua, brincar com diversos elementos, e a gente vai perdendo isso. Eu adoro jogar, Teresa, quero jogar quando te encontrar. Às vezes, na vida adulta, né, começam a ligar o jogar como um sinônimo de competitividade, coisas nesse sentido, e nunca necessariamente ligado ao descanso, né? E eu achei muito interessante, porque, na verdade, eu acho que é um elemento que traz descanso mesmo, né? Adorei. Então, estou tomando isso como exemplos aqui para mim. Acho que tem muita coisa que eu me vejo assim nas palavras de vocês, mas para mim tem uma questão que tá muito conectada com a minha religião, a minha ancestralidade de alguma forma, que, sobretudo no Brasil, que a gente tem o racismo religioso, minha religião é o candomblé. A gente, enquanto profissional negra, vai sendo moldada a esconder um pouco isso, de alguma forma, né? E nos últimos tempos eu tenho exercício de alguma forma, exercido politicamente a importância da minha religião na minha constituição enquanto mulher negra. Então, tem uma questão política de falar sobre isso, mas tem uma questão não efetiva mesmo, né? Estar conectada com a minha religião, fazer os ritos, frequentar e falar com a minha mãe de santo e estar nas festas, isso para mim é fundamental para pensar descanso e para pensar autocuidado, né? E o que advém a partir disso. Não significa ser fundamentalista, né? Não significa que as coisas não podem coexistir, né? Como muitas vezes aqui no Brasil, politicamente, religião e processos decisórios, eles se confundem. Mas a espiritualidade, para mim, é um lugar, efetivamente, onde eu encontro descanso, onde me orienta para pensar caminhos de descanso, inclusive. E o que ajuda, eu penso que estar descansado ou ter esse espaço para autocuidado me torna uma pessoa com uma escuta mais atenta com a equipe. Então, quando eu estou descansada, ou quando eu estou com essa situação equilibrada de alguma forma na minha vida, ao ouvir problemas, seja de que ordem seja, da equipe, eu fico muito mais aberta de tentar construir soluções juntas, seja para problemas da ordem pessoal, seja para problemas complexos, né, de entregas de trabalho, de projetos. Então, eu acho que isso está totalmente ligado, né? Uma pessoa estressada, com nível de cortisona, né, desequilibrado, que não ficou, como a Rhaea falou, dessas pesquisas da gente estar deitada, né, para poder, enfim, equilibrar a nossa humanidade, certamente não consegue estar aberto para receber problemas que surgem inerentes ao trabalho, né? Tampouco consegue, de alguma forma, oxigenar a cabeça para trazer novas soluções para problemas complexos. Então, as coisas estão totalmente ligadas. Eu entendo que estar descansada me torna uma pessoa com uma escuta ativa muito melhor e criativa para pensar em soluções também.
Thank you, Manuel, for that. I will, yeah, just looking at time, we are almost to our time. So I will ask, before we make our closing remarks, make your last reflections on this topic. I'll give you about 2 to 3 minutes each, and I will start with Rhaea, then again Teresa, and then Manuel last. Thank you. Just your last reflections, 2 to 3 minutes on what we've discussed, and what would you want our participants as their take home on this discussion?
What was coming to my mind, other than just how much of an important and wonderful space this has been to be in, and I was going back to what had come up at the beginning of the call around the importance of experimenting, and I feel that feels like a really important thing to leave with participants. The importance of just experimenting, of being with yourself, of seeing what works with yourself. I think both Teresa and Manuela have both spoken to this, of just not creating anything that is going to give you another thing to think about, but to look at where the space makes sense for you and what the joy is. And I was also reflecting a lot on how we stand on the back of giants in terms of Black revolutionary thinkers, icons, writers, dreamers, carers. They have told us everything we need to know. There was not, I think, a piece of work that, whether or not it was as, clearly outlined as an Audre Lorde or a Tricia Hersey, or more in the implications of, Assata Shakur or Angela Davies. Every single thinker, I think globally across womanist and Black feminist diaspora, speaks to the importance of really using our mental, emotional and spiritual rest as a liberation strategy. So we have all of, I guess for me, we know everything we need to know. And Manuela, I heard you speak to this earlier when you were talking about the importance of looking at this, I think, for an intersectional lens. My head, when I think about this subject, goes back to the women who need it most are the ones who struggle the most to access it. And what can we really, really do? And I think embodiment, which has already been discussed, is a massive part of that. If we can't find the space to constantly, be talking through all the theories that we all know very, very well, but what can we do within our communities to really embody that? And what can we do with our institutions to create that around the policies and the incredible examples that we've heard about on this call? But also just really tying back to something that's not lost on me, that we're gathered here today as Black women across geographies, across histories, and that is no small thing in and of itself. And so just really continuing to sort of sit within their spirits of dreaming, of imagining, and of living really, really fully is the lasting thoughts that I wanted to share.
Thank you, Rhaea. That is important to get a gathering, and this has been the B-WEL's mission, to get a gathering of Black women across geographic, wherever you are, for us to pull together and support each other as a community, as one community. I will go to Teresa for your last or closing reflections.
Yeah. Rhaea, that was beautiful and spot on what you said. So thank you so much for that. I've been, really thinking this through. One of the things we haven't really talked about in this has been levels of accountability to each other for that rest and for that well-being, how we are showing up for each other again in spaces like this. But what does that accountability look like? Who's helping us to remember that your mornings are, is it your assistant, your colleague at work, your partner in life, your dear friend, like whomever it is who's helping you to hold accountable to oneself, that actually tells us it is okay. Self-care is not a level of self-indulgence. It is actually a mandatory part of what we need to be doing. And so that was one thing that I just realized we hadn't really gotten into. And I think it's so critical. I tell all of my friends, right? If we do a silent retreat, you tell them all, don't text you, right? Because you're not going to get back to them, because if you don't tell them, then they're going to have a meltdown that you haven't gotten back to them, right? So like, how are we holding levels of accountability? And then the last thing that I wanted to lift up is, is this permission to experiment, but, an acknowledgement that we know who we are. Take the time to figure out who you are and what works for you. There is no right or wrong way to do self-care and wellness, right? And I think, we are, I'm highly competitive. And, there's no wrong way to do this, right? And that when I know myself, I can feel my tension because I'm not doing it all perfectly or right or whatever, then I take that step back, to figure out what that looks like, or to give myself room to wonder and to dream and to vision. And, that's something I really, we need self-care. We need to take care of ourselves. We need to model what that looks like, both for our ancestors and our siblings and our parents, right? And for the next generation of leaders who are coming up. If they can see this as a model, they may accept leadership as a spot they want to go into, not a spot they've mistakenly landed in. And so how do we model what self-care looks like so that they can see that you can have these very full lives? Balance might not be what we're striving for, but fullness might be. And so how do we get there? What does that look like? And how do we model for that? And to acknowledge that every day is a new start. Every hour is a new start. And so if we try, like me, to meditate and we don't get it done, we can try it again. That's all about, if we try to slow down and we don't do it as well, we can try again, and to give ourselves that permission to just keep trying. So that's my last little bit. And there's no right or wrong. And it's the things that I have to remind myself about all the time.
Thank you, sir. It's a permission to experiment. Yeah, thank you so much. Last but not least, we'll go to you, Manuel, for your closing reflection.
Muito obrigada, foi uma delícia estar aqui. Que pena que está acabando, mas eu já quero uma nova rodada presencial, se possível. Em novembro vai ter a Marcha das Mulheres Negras aqui no Brasil. Vocês são muito bem-vindas. Seria muito legal se a gente conseguisse ampliar essa discussão ao vivo. Não tenho mais a acrescentar, foi muito gostoso essa troca, tomei nota, vou tentar algumas coisas aqui. Eu acho que o que eu deixo é que a gente siga se observando, tentando quebrar lógicas que parece que estão impostas e que parecem ser intransponíveis de alguma forma, mas que sempre tem fissura, sempre tem forma de tentar radicalizar nas brechas. Acho que é isso.
Thank you, Manuel. Thank you to our panelists for holding us for this conversation and holding space for all of us and hearing things that we can try, and hopefully the people in the participants that are part of this conversation can as this will be posted, can contribute some more on what are the other things that we can do to achieve this. And for me, I think for my closing remarks is that I will go back to my running experience. Most runners for a marathon or even for an ultra, you have a set schedule on what you need to do, the amount of kilometers per week. But there is they will tell you the most important week is the week, we call it rest week, because it's the week before the race or 2 weeks before the race, where you absolutely have to kind of stop doing what you think. And of course, most runners will try to get one last run or one last set of trainings, which normally is detrimental to your race day. So I think for us as Black women, we have a race to run. We need at every race that we're running, or every fight or every mission that we want to achieve, we need that block of rest to continuously and be able to succeed on what we want to do. So whatever thing that can make you rest, please take that and negotiate to make it a non-negotiable. And with that, I will hand over to Delo to make a few announcements and close out the session. Thank you, everybody, for listening to us.
Obrigada, Nox. Eu acho que você não me ouviu no começo, porque a tradução ainda não estava funcionando. Então, eu vou repetir um agradecimento à generosidade de vocês, pelo tempo, pela abertura. Foi realmente uma troca muito poderosa, exatamente o que a gente gostaria de fomentar, então agradeço a vocês pela presença, agradeço a Nox pela condução brilhante, as intérpretes que estão aqui nos acompanhando, que fizeram esse trabalho cuidadoso durante toda a interpretação, a equipe da B-WEL, que tem trabalhado com tanto cuidado para garantir que esse processo dê certo, aos nossos financiadores também e parceiros que têm garantido que a gente tem os recursos para fazer esse projeto. A gente tem tido essas masterclasses ao redor, né, das esferas de poder da B-WEL, então eu convido aquelas que ainda não assistiram a assistir as 2 primeiras, que já estão disponíveis no YouTube. Essa também vai ser sintetizada, vai estar disponível em breve. E quero convidá-las para a nossa última masterclass, que vai acontecer ali, provavelmente no começo de dezembro, onde a gente vai falar de um tema muito importante, conectado com o poder em comunidade, mas também o poder de empoderar outras, especialmente no momento que a gente vem vivendo globalmente, né, ao redor da diáspora, em que o mercado de trabalho tem mudado tanto, mas que a gente também já aprendeu tanto, como a gente consegue fazer as práticas de contratação e de gestão de recursos humanos de uma forma mais inclusiva, e como a gente pode aprender umas das outras ao redor da diáspora, como a gente fez hoje. Então, obrigada a todo mundo pela presença, pela paciência, pelo engajamento. Estamos animadas para continuar com vocês, construindo e apoiando no que for possível nesse diálogo ao redor da diáspora. Um beijo muito grande. Tchau, tchau.